My name is Abby, I'm 32, and I just got back from a huge business trip to find the locks on my dream house had been changed. Exhausted and confused, I drove to my parents' home, where my brother Leo was showing off photos from his lavish Maldives vacation. With a smirk on his face, my dad casually announced, "Your house paid for their little vacation." The shock hit me like a ton of bricks, but I just smiled in response. "What's so funny?" he snapped. "If you're enjoying this story, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to Hidden Revenge to follow my journey of betrayal and unexpected revenge. My name is Abby Miller, a 32-year-old marketing director who has been self-sufficient since the age of 18. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Austin, Texas, I learned early on that if I wanted something, I had to get it myself. While my parents had the financial means to help with my education, they chose to prioritize my younger brother, Leo. Their reasoning was always the same. He needs more support than you do. You're naturally gifted. This pattern of favoritism was established long before I could understand its implications. During my high school years, I worked 3 jobs simultaneously to save for college. Weekday mornings at a coffee shop, evenings at a local restaurant, and weekends at a retail store. My parents praised my work ethic, but never offered financial assistance. Meanwhile, Leo received a brand new car for his 16th birthday and an unlimited allowance that he spent frivolously on video games and parties. Despite the obvious favoritism, I maintained a relationship with my family, holding on to the hope that someday they would recognize my achievements with the same enthusiasm they showed for Leo's smallest accomplishments. This hope, I would later realize, was misplaced. Leo, now 27, has never held a steady job. His resume consists of short-lived positions that he quit because they were beneath him or too stressful. Every failed attempt at independence was met with understanding and financial support from our parents. They paid his rent when he was fired for chronic tardiness. They covered his credit card debt when he overspent on designer clothes. They even financed his brief attempt at starting a podcast about the luxury lifestyle, which he abandoned after 3 episodes. My brother grew accustomed to having his problems solved by our parents. He never developed the resilience or responsibility that comes from facing consequences. When his girlfriend of 6 months broke up with him for his immaturity, my parents consoled him as though he had suffered an unimaginable tragedy. After graduating college with honors, I secured an entry-level position at a marketing firm. While my colleagues complained about student loans, I had none, but only because I had worked myself to exhaustion for 4 years, taking maximum course loads to graduate early and save on tuition. The pride I felt in this accomplishment was dampened when my father commented, "You were lucky to find those jobs. Not everyone has your advantages." For 5 years, I lived in a small apartment, saving diligently for a down payment on a house. I brought lunch to work every day, limited my social outings, and tracked every dollar I spent. When I finally had enough saved, I began my search for the perfect home. The house I found was a 2-story craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood with mature oak trees lining the street. Built in the 1950s, it had a character that modern developments lacked. Wide plank hardwood floors, a brick fireplace, and large windows that filled the rooms with natural light. The backyard was spacious, with a small garden that reminded me of the one my grandmother, Eleanor, had lovingly tended. This detail was particularly significant to me. My grandmother had been my sanctuary during childhood. When the favoritism at home became unbearable, I would bike to her house 3 miles away. She would welcome me with freshly baked cookies and unwavering support. "You're stronger than you know, Abby," she would say, "and one day, that strength will be your greatest asset." The house near her old neighborhood felt like a connection to her, even though she had passed away 3 years earlier. When I signed the closing papers, I felt her presence, her approval. This was more than a financial investment. It was a symbol of my independence and resilience. When I invited my family to see my new home, their reactions were predictably dismissive. My mother commented on how much work it would need. My father questioned whether I had overpaid. Leo laughed at the outdated kitchen, though he had never cooked a meal in his life. Must be nice to be so lucky, he said, as though my years of hard work and sacrifice were irrelevant. For 2 years, I poured love and effort into that house. I painted each room myself, restored the hardwood floors, and planted flowers in the garden that my grandmother would have loved. It became my sanctuary, a physical manifestation of my journey to self-sufficiency. Then came the opportunity that could advance my career significantly. A 2-week business trip to Singapore to pitch our marketing campaign to potential international clients. My boss made it clear that this assignment could lead to a promotion if handled successfully. The timing wasn't ideal. The trip would overlap with the blooming of the rose bushes I had planted in memory of my grandmother. I arranged for a gardening service, but my mother suggested I leave a key with them instead. We'll check on the house while you're gone, she offered. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The day before my departure, Leo called, his voice carrying the familiar tone of self-pity. His girlfriend of 3 months had broken up with him via text message. I need to get away, he lamented. I need time to heal from this betrayal. He spoke about needing a luxury vacation, perhaps to Bali or the Maldives, something Instagram-worthy to show his ex what she was missing. When I asked how he planned to afford such an extravagant trip on his meager savings, he sighed dramatically. Mom and Dad say they can't help this time. They claim they're saving for retirement or something. So unfair. A sense of unease crept over me as I handed my house key to my mother that evening. She noticed my hesitation. Don't worry, she assured me. We'll take good care of everything. I should have listened to my instincts. I should have made other arrangements. But family loyalty and the pressure of my upcoming business trip clouded my judgment. I boarded my flight to Singapore the next morning, unaware that I was leaving my dream home vulnerable to the very people who should have protected it. After 2 grueling weeks of presentations, client meetings, and networking events in Singapore, I was physically and mentally exhausted. The trip had been successful beyond expectations, with our company securing contracts with 3 major Asian corporations, but the constant pressure to perform had taken its toll. All I wanted was to sleep in my own bed in my own house, surrounded by the comfort I had created for myself. My flight landed at Austin Bergstrom International Airport at 8:30 in the evening. Rain pattered against the windows of the taxi as we drove through familiar streets. When the driver pulled up to my house, I noticed that the porch light was off. Strange, since I had programmed it to turn on automatically at sunset. Dragging my suitcase up the front steps, I inserted my key into the lock. It didn't turn. Thinking I might be using the wrong key, I tried another. Still nothing. I stepped back and examined the door. The lock had been changed. Confusion and alarm washed over me. Had there been a break-in? Had my parents needed to replace the lock for some reason? I rang the doorbell, thinking perhaps they were inside, but no one answered. The house stood dark and silent. I called my mother's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. My father answered on the 3rd ring, his voice unusually cheerful. Abby, you're back. How was the trip? Dad, I'm at my house and my key doesn't work. Did something happen? A moment of silence followed. You should come over to our place. We need to talk. The ominous tone in his voice sent a chill through me. I returned to the waiting taxi and directed the driver to my parents' suburban home 15 minutes away. As I entered their living room, the scene before me was surreal. Leo lounged on the sofa, scrolling through photos on his phone with a satisfied smile. My mother busied herself in the kitchen, avoiding eye contact. My father sat in his recliner, watching a basketball game with casual interest. What is going on? I asked, my voice strained. Why was my lock changed? Leo looked up from his phone, his expression smug. Check these out, he said, turning the screen toward me. The photos showed him lounging on a pristine beach, sipping cocktails by an infinity pool. and posing in front of a luxury water bungalow. Maldives, baby. 5-star all the way. I stared at the images in confusion. How did you afford this? I thought Mom and Dad said they couldn't help. My father muted the television and leaned forward. We found another solution, he said, his tone matter-of-fact. We sold your house. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my knees weaken, and I gripped the back of a chair for support. You what? We sold your house, he repeated, more firmly this time. Got a good price, too. All cash offer, closed in 10 days. My mother finally emerged from the kitchen, wringing her hands. Leo really needed this trip, Abby. He was devastated after Jessica broke up with him. You know how sensitive he is. I struggled to process what I was hearing. You sold my house without my permission? That's illegal. How did you even do that? My father waved dismissively. We had your key. We had access to your paperwork in your home office. The rest was just details. Details? You mean fraud? My voice rose with incredulity. Leo interjected, showing no remorse. The resort was amazing. Private, butler, unlimited spa treatments, underwater restaurant. I needed this, Abby. You have no idea how hard my breakup was. Rage and disbelief battled within me, but I forced myself to remain outwardly calm. So, you committed fraud, sold my house without my knowledge or consent, and used the money for a luxury vacation? My mother's expression turned defensive. Not all of it went to the vacation. We needed a new car, too. And Leo deserved something nice after everything he's been through. Everything he's been through. I echoed, incredulous. A 3-month relationship ending is justification for stealing my house? The house I worked 3 jobs to save for? The house I spent years renovating? My father's face hardened. Don't be so dramatic. You can always buy another house. You're doing well at your job. Besides, we're your parents. We know what's best. What's best? You think stealing from your daughter is what's best. We didn't steal, my father said firmly. We redistributed family resources to where they were needed most. Leo needed healing. You were too attached to that house anyway. Too attached? It was my house. My father leaned back in his chair, a smirk forming on his lips. Well, not anymore. Your house paid for their fun. He gestured toward Leo, who was still absorbed in his vacation photos. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The shock and anger gave way to an eerie calm. I felt the corners of my mouth turn upward into a smile. My father's smirk faltered. What's so funny? He snapped. I maintained my smile, but said nothing. Instead, I picked up my suitcase and headed for the door. Where are you going? My mother called after me. To make some calls, I replied, my voice steady. Enjoy your evening. As I closed the door behind me, I could hear Julian asking, what's her problem? She can just buy another house. Little did they know that their actions had set in motion a series of events that would change our family forever, and not in the way they imagined. I drove through the rain-soaked streets, tears blurring my vision until I reached the apartment complex where my best friend, Chloe, lived. Since college, Chloe had been my rock, the sister I never had but desperately needed. Her lights were on despite the late hour, and she answered my frantic knocking in pajamas, her face immediately shifting from sleepy confusion to concern. Abby, what happened? She pulled me inside, taking my rain-drenched coat. I collapsed onto her couch, the enormity of the situation finally breaking through my shock. Between sobs, I explained what my family had done. Chloe listened, her expression morphing from disbelief to outrage. They sold your house without your consent for a vacation. Her voice rose with each question. That's not just immoral, Abby. That's criminal. We need to call the police right now. I took a deep breath, regaining some composure. There's something else, Chloe. Something about the house that they don't know. Chloe sat beside me, her brow furrowed. What do you mean? My mind drifted back to my grandmother, Eleanor, the one person in my family who had truly seen and valued me. While my parents lavished attention and resources on Leo, Grandma Eleanor had invested in me, not with money, but with unwavering belief in my potential. Do you remember my grandmother? I asked. Chloe nodded. Of course. She was wonderful. Always had cookies when we visited in high school and never failed to ask about my art projects. She was the only one who ever put me first, I said softly, the only one who saw how my parents treated me compared to Leo. In my mind, I could see Grandma Eleanor tending her garden, dispensing wisdom along with freshly picked tomatoes. Family should lift you up, Abby, not tear you down, she would say. Remember that you deserve love that doesn't come with conditions. 3 years before I bought my house, Grandma Eleanor had passed away peacefully in her sleep. What few people knew was that before her death, she had established a private trust with me as the beneficiary. She had been careful to keep this arrangement secret from my father, her son, who had previously borrowed substantial sums from her that were never repaid. The house, I explained to Chloe, is not technically mine, at least not in the way they think. Chloe looked confused. What do you mean? I'm the listed owner, yes, but I'm actually the trustee of my grandmother's estate. The house was purchased through a trust she established before she died. Wait, Chloe said, trying to process this information. So, the house belongs to a trust, not directly to you? I nodded. Exactly. Grandma knew how my father operated. She knew he had taken advantage of her financially in the past. So, she created a trust with very specific conditions. The primary one being that if any family member attempted to misappropriate the trust assets, they would forfeit all inheritance rights. Chloe's eyes widened. So, by selling your house, they violated the terms of the trust? I confirmed. And there's more. I suspected something like this might happen. My father had been asking too many questions about the house's value before I left. Leo had been too interested in how much equity I had built up. What did you do? Chloe asked. I installed security cameras before I left. Hidden ones, connected to cloud storage. I have video evidence of them entering my house, going through my papers, meeting with a realtor, and forging my signature on documents. Chloe stared at me in amazement. You knew they would try something like this. I sighed heavily. I hoped they wouldn't, but living with them for 18 years taught me to prepare for the worst. My grandmother taught me that too in her own way. She always said trust should be earned, not automatically given, even to family. Chloe reached for her phone. We need to call the police. This is clear fraud. I placed my hand over hers. Not yet. I need to speak with my grandmother's lawyer first. There's a process to this. The trust has specific protocols for handling violations. But Abby, they sold your house. Where will you live? What about all your belongings? I had been so consumed by the betrayal that I hadn't fully processed these practical concerns. I don't know, I admitted. I assumed they packed up my things, or maybe they're still in the house. The new owners might not have moved in yet. Chloe squeezed my hand. You'll stay here until we figure this out. And we will figure it out. Your family cannot get away with this. As the initial shock began to subside, a steely determination took its place. My grandmother had protected me even after her death, preparing for a betrayal she must have sensed might come. I would not let her down. Tomorrow, I said, my voice steady for the first time since discovering the truth. I'll contact Mr. Davis, my grandmother's lawyer. He has all the trust documents, and then we'll make a plan. Chloe nodded, her expression fierce with loyalty. Whatever you need, I'm here. Those three have no idea what they've done, do they? No, I replied, a grim smile forming. They think they just sold a house. They don't realize they sold their futures. As I settled into Chloe's guest room that night, exhaustion finally overtaking me, I felt my grandmother's presence stronger than ever. "I'll make this right, Grandma," I whispered into the darkness. "I promise." The following morning, I woke with purpose. Despite the jet lag and emotional exhaustion, I was ready to take action. Chloe had already left for work, but she had written a note, called in sick today, making breakfast. We have war planning to do. Over Chloe's homemade pancakes, we outlined our first steps. My priority was meeting with Mr. Davis, my grandmother's attorney, and the legal administrator of her trust. I called his office as soon as it opened at 9 a.m. "Abby," Mr. Davis greeted me, his voice warm but concerned. "I was about to call you. I received some unusual paperwork regarding property in the trust. Are you selling the house?" "No, Mr. Davis," I replied firmly. "I am not. But my parents and brother forged my signature and sold it without my knowledge or consent while I was out of the country." His sharp intake of breath told me everything. "That is a serious allegation, and unfortunately, it aligns with what I'm seeing in these documents. Can you come to my office today?" 2 hours later, Chloe and I sat across from Mr. Davis in his downtown office. At 65, with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes, he had the commanding presence of someone who had spent decades in courtrooms. He had been my grandmother's trusted advisor and friend for over 30 years. "First," he said, placing a folder on his desk, "let me assure you that this sale is not valid. As trustee, you are the only person authorized to sell assets in the trust. Any transfer without your legitimate signature is fraudulent. Can we reverse it?" I asked. "Yes, but it will take time. The innocent purchasers have rights too, and they likely have no idea about the fraud. We will need to involve the police, as forgery is a criminal offense." I nodded, feeling both relief and dread. What about my grandmother's provision regarding family members who try to misappropriate trust assets? Mr. Davis's expression turned grim. "That provision is quite clear. According to the trust documents, any family member who attempts to take or convert trust assets for their own benefit immediately forfeits all rights to any inheritance or benefit from the trust. Based on what you've told me, your parents and brother have triggered this provision." Chloe leaned forward. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Mr. Davis explained, "that they are now excluded from any future distributions from the trust, and the trust contains more than just the house." This was news to me. "What do you mean?" "Your grandmother was quite shrewd with her investments. The house was purchased using only a portion of the trust assets. There are additional funds that were to be distributed on your 35th birthday, with smaller portions designated for your parents and brother, provided they respected the terms of the trust." My heart sank. "So they've lost their inheritance too, not just stolen my house?" "I'm afraid so," Mr. Davis confirmed. "Your grandmother anticipated something like this might happen. She experienced similar behavior from your father during her lifetime." I remembered my grandmother's warnings about my father's sense of entitlement, how he had borrowed money from her repeatedly, always with excuses for why he couldn't repay it, how he had once tried to convince her to refinance her home to fund his failed business venture. "What do we do now?" I asked. Mr. Davis outlined a comprehensive plan. First, we would file a police report for the forgery and fraud. Then we would contact the title company and the new homeowners to explain the situation. Finally, we would invoke the trust provision and formally document my family's violation. "The process will take time," he cautioned, "and it will not be pleasant. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about my parents' smirking faces, Leo's casual dismissal of my years of hard work. "Yes," I replied. "I'm ready." Our next step was identifying and contacting the buyers of my house. Through Mr. Davis's connections, we learned they were a young couple, the Clarks, who had just relocated to Austin for work. They had been told I was selling quickly due to a job transfer and had never met me personally. All communication had been through my representatives, my parents. With Mr. Davis present, I called the Clarks to explain the situation. Their shock and distress were palpable. "We had no idea," Mrs. Clark said, her voice shaking. "We thought everything was legitimate. We've already started renovations." "This is not your fault," I assured them. "You are victims too. My attorney will work with you to make this right." Mr. Davis explained that they would be compensated for any expenses and inconvenience. The Clarks agreed to cooperate with the investigation, providing copies of all documents and communications they had received. Next came the police report. Detective Evans listened carefully as I explained the situation, examining the video evidence from my security cameras. The footage clearly showed my father and Leo entering my home office, rifling through my documents, and later meeting with a real estate agent. Another clip captured my mother practicing my signature before finally forging it on the sales documents. "This is pretty clear-cut fraud and forgery," Detective Evans said. "We will need statements from the buyers and the real estate agent involved, but you have strong evidence here." As we left the police station, I received a call from my cousin, Ryan, the only relative I remained close to. "Abby, what's going on?" "Uncle Robert just called Dad in a panic, saying you're trying to have them arrested." I explained the situation to Ryan, who had always seen through my parents' favoritism. "I'm not surprised," he admitted, "but even for them this is extreme. Do you know they also bought a new car with the money, and Leo has been bragging about his trip all over social media." This new information fueled my resolve. Through Ryan, I learned more about the extent of their betrayal. The house had sold for $420,000. Leo's Maldives trip had cost nearly $70,000, including first-class flights and the overwater bungalow. My parents had purchased a new luxury SUV for $60,000. The remaining funds were in a joint account they had opened, already being spent on various indulgences. "There's something else you should know," Ryan added hesitantly. "This isn't the first time they've tried to access your grandmother's money. About a year after she died, Uncle Robert approached my dad about contesting her will. He was convinced there was more money somewhere that you were hiding." This revelation, while painful, did not surprise me. It only confirmed what I already knew about my family's character and reinforced my determination to hold them accountable. Over the next few days, Chloe and I meticulously documented everything. We compiled financial records, trust documents, video evidence, and statements from the Clarks and others involved in the fraudulent sale. Mr. Davis prepared legal notices, formally invoking the trust provisions that disinherited my family members. We should deliver these in person, I decided. I want to see their faces when they realize what they've done. Chloe squeezed my hand. "Are you sure? It's going to be ugly." "I'm sure," I replied, "but I don't want to do it at their house, where they have the home field advantage. I want neutral territory with witnesses." After some discussion, we decided on a family gathering. I would invite my parents and Leo, along with other extended family members, to a dinner at a private room in a local restaurant. There, with relatives as witnesses, I would reveal the truth and present the legal consequences of their actions. Ryan helped arrange the gathering, telling my parents I wanted to clear the air about recent events. They agreed readily, perhaps thinking I had accepted their betrayal or even that I might apologize for my overreaction. The night before the confrontation, I sat alone in Chloe's guest room, looking at an old photo of my grandmother and me in her garden. "I wish you were here," I whispered. "But in a way you still are. You prepared for this, didn't you? You knew they might try something like this." In the photo, my grandmother's eyes twinkled with the wisdom of someone who had seen through pretenses and still chose kindness when possible, but boundaries when necessary. I would need both kindness and boundaries tomorrow. "I'll make you proud," I promised the photo. "Not with revenge, but with justice." The private dining room at Riverside Grill was elegant without being ostentatious, with large windows overlooking the Colorado River. I had arrived early with Chloe and Ryan to ensure everything was in place. Mr. Davis would arrive shortly before the scheduled confrontation, along with Detective Evans, who had agreed to be present in an unofficial capacity. Family members began arriving at 6:30 p.m. My Aunt Carol and Uncle Steve, my father's sister and her husband, Cousin Megan and her husband Ben, my mother's brother, Uncle Mike and his wife, Aunt Susan, all people who had witnessed the dynamic of our family for years, who had seen the preferential treatment Leo received, but had never intervened. My parents and Leo arrived last, 15 minutes late. My mother looked nervous, fidgeting with her new designer handbag, likely purchased with my house money. My father appeared confident, even smug, as though this dinner was a formality before I accepted the new reality. Leo was engrossed in his phone, probably still posting photos from his ill-gotten vacation. Abby, my father greeted me with forced joviality. Good to see you've calmed down. Family dinner is a nice idea. I maintained a neutral expression. Thank you all for coming. Please, let's eat first. We can talk after dinner. Throughout the meal, conversation remained superficial, whether local sports teams, an upcoming family wedding. My parents seemed to relax as the dinner progressed without incident. Leo even boasted about his trip, describing the underwater restaurant and private butler service in detail, oblivious to the inappropriateness of flaunting his stolen luxury. The snorkeling was incredible, he enthused. You could see manta rays right from the deck of my water villa. Worth every penny. Every penny of my money, I thought, but said nothing. As dessert was served, Mr. Davis arrived, followed by Detective Evans. I introduced them simply as my guests, watching my father's expression shift from confusion to weariness. Before we continue, I said, standing to address the gathered family, I'd like to explain why I invited you all here tonight. The room quieted, all eyes turning to me. As some of you know, while I was in Singapore on business, my house was sold without my knowledge or consent. The proceeds were used to fund Leo's vacation to the Maldives, a new car for my parents, and various other purchases. My father interrupted, his voice sharp. Abby, this is hardly the place to air family disagreements. We've discussed this already. No, Dad, we haven't discussed it. You informed me of what you had done. There was no discussion. I turned to address the wider family. What you may not know is how this sale was accomplished. I have evidence I'd like to share. Before my father could object further, I nodded to Chloe, who connected her laptop to the room's projector. The screen lit up with footage from my hidden security cameras. The first clip showed my father and Leo entering my home office, searching through my desk drawers until they found my financial documents. Here it is, my father said in the video. The house is worth at least $400,000, more than enough for what we need. Leo's recorded voice was eager. Can we really do this? Will it work? My father's response was chilling. Trust me, she'll never know until it's too late. And by then, what can she do? The next clip showed my mother at my dining room table, practicing my signature repeatedly on a notepad, then finally signing my name on official-looking documents. My father stood over her shoulder, directing, Make them more looped. She does that thing with the final. Wait. The room had gone completely silent. My relatives watched in shocked disbelief. My mother's face had drained of color. My father's jaw was clenched tight. Turn that off, he demanded. This is private family business. Fraud isn't private, Dad. It's criminal. I gestured to Detective Evans. This is Detective Evans from the Austin Police Department. She's investigating the fraudulent sale of my house. My father's confident facade cracked slightly. This is ridiculous. We're your parents. We had every right. No, I said firmly. You didn't. And there's something else you should know about that house. I nodded to Mr. Davis, who stepped forward. I am Theodore Davis, attorney at law, he introduced himself. I represented Eleanor Collins, Abby's grandmother, and I am the administrator of her trust. My father's expression shifted from anger to confusion. What trust? What does this have to do with my mother? Mr. Davis continued, his voice measured and professional. The house was not owned directly by Abby. It was purchased through a trust established by Mrs. Collins before her death. Abby is the trustee and primary beneficiary of that trust. I watched understanding slowly dawn on my father's face. Leo looked confused, looking between our father and Mr. Davis. What does that mean? Leo asked. It means, I explained, that the house was never mine to sell. It belongs to Grandma's trust. And more importantly, Grandma included a specific provision in her trust regarding family members who might try to take advantage. Mr. Harrison removed several documents from his briefcase. The Eleanor Collins Trust explicitly states that any family member who attempts to misappropriate, convert, or otherwise interfere with trust assets immediately and irrevocably forfeits all rights to any distribution from the trust. My mother gasped. What does that mean, Robert? She asked my father. Mr. Davis answered before my father could respond. It means that by fraudulently selling trust property, you, your husband, and your son have forfeited all inheritance rights under the trust. This includes the scheduled distribution that would have occurred on Abby's 35th birthday. What distribution? My father demanded. What are you talking about? Your mother was a shrewd investor, Mr. Miller, Mr. Davis explained. The house represented only a portion of the trust assets. There were additional funds to be distributed to family members, including substantial amounts designated for you and your son, provided you respected the terms of the trust. The color drained from my father's face. How much? He asked hoarsely. $250,000 each, Mr. Davis replied, plus the continued use of the vacation cabin on Lake Travis, which is also part of the trust, all of which you have now forfeited. Leo jumped to his feet. This isn't fair. We didn't know about any trust. Ignorance of the trust does not excuse fraud, Mr. Davis responded calmly. The illegal sale of trust property and forgery of the trustee's signature are still criminal acts. My relatives were watching the scene unfold with expressions ranging from shock to dismay. My Aunt Carol had her hand over her mouth. Uncle Mike was shaking his head in disbelief. You can't do this, my father said, his voice no longer confident but pleading. She was my mother. That money should have come to me directly in the first place. Your mother disagreed, Mr. Davis replied simply, and she had her reasons, which these events have unfortunately validated. My mother turned on my father, her voice trembling. You said this would be simple. You said there would be no consequences. Now we've lost everything. Leo rounded on them both. This is your fault. You said she'd never find out. You said the house was legally hers to sell. Watching them turn on each other, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness. This was my family, the people who should have protected and supported me, now revealed in their true nature. Detective Evans stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, Leo Miller, I need you to come to the station to provide statements regarding the fraudulent sale and forgery charges. Are we being arrested? My mother asked, panic in her voice. Not at this time, Detective Evans responded. But this is a serious criminal matter that will require formal investigation. My father made one last desperate attempt. Abby, you can't do this to your family. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. You owe us. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me for my response. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before speaking. I owed you respect, and I gave it, even when you showed none for me. I owed you gratitude for the basic parental duties you fulfilled, and I gave that too. But I never owed you my house, my financial security, or my future. And I certainly never owed you the right to commit crimes in my name. I turned to address our extended family. I didn't bring you all here for sympathy or to take sides. I brought you here as witnesses to the truth, so there can be no misrepresentation of what happened. This was not a misunderstanding or a family disagreement. It was fraud, forgery, and theft. My Aunt Carol spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. Robert, how could you do this to your own daughter? My father had no answer. The confident, controlling man who had dismissed my achievements and justified his favoritism for decades now stood silent, his deception exposed. As Detective Evans escorted my parents and Leo toward the door, my cousin Megan approached me. Abby, I'm so sorry. We all saw how they treated you growing up, but none of us said anything. We should have. One by one, my relatives came to express similar sentiments. Years of silent observation, finally giving way to acknowledgement. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was something, a recognition that what had happened to me was not right. When everyone had gone except Chloe, Ryan, and Mr. Davis, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the evening. It's really over, isn't it? I asked, more to myself than anyone else. The legal process is just beginning, Mr. Davis cautioned. But yes, in many ways, this chapter is closing. Your grandmother would be proud of how you handled yourself tonight. When I finally felt ready to move back into my house, nearly a year after the confrontation, I approached it as a reclamation project. I repainted every room, replaced the flooring in areas my family had walked most frequently, and redesigned the garden with new plants that had no association with the past. Chloe helped me sage the house, a ritual cleansing she insisted would remove negative energy. While I was skeptical of the metaphysical aspects, the symbolic act of purification resonated deeply. Room by room, we moved through the house, declaring it reclaimed and renewed. As the physical transformation progressed, I felt an internal shift as well. The house was becoming mine again, not just legally but emotionally. The shadows of betrayal began to recede, not disappearing entirely, but diminishing in their power to disturb my peace. One afternoon, as I planted new rose bushes in memory of my grandmother, I realized something profound. The greatest theft my family had attempted was not of the house itself, but of my sense of worth. By treating my years of hard work as something they could casually appropriate, they had attempted to reinforce a lifetime of messages that my achievements were less valuable than Leo's needs. In refusing to accept their actions, in fighting for justice rather than surrendering to their narrative, I had reclaimed more than property. I had asserted my inherent value and my right to be treated with respect. My grandmother would have seen this as the true victory, more important than any financial or legal outcome. As the second year after the betrayal began, my parents made one final attempt at contact. Leo had moved to another state for a fresh start, and they were considering following him. "We are still your parents," my mother wrote. "Family should forgive." After careful consideration and discussion with Dr. Bennett, I composed a brief response, the only communication I had initiated since the confrontation. "I do not wish you ill. I hope you find peace and growth in your new location. However, I have learned that true family respects boundaries and treats loved ones with dignity. When those fundamental elements are violated, forgiveness may be possible, but restoration of trust requires more than words. It requires transformed character, demonstrated over time. Until or unless that occurs, I will be continuing my life separately from yours." I didn't expect a meaningful response, and none came, just accusations of being unforgiving and reminders of all they had supposedly done for me over the years. It confirmed that my decision to maintain distance was the right one for my well-being. My house, once a symbol of achievement, then a site of betrayal, had transformed again. It was now a testament to resilience, a physical reminder that what others attempt to take from us does not define our worth or our future. Like the new garden blooming where the old one had been, something beautiful could grow from even the most painful disruption. 2 years after that fateful day when I returned from Singapore to find my house stolen, My life had transformed in ways I could never have anticipated. The painful journey had led to unexpected growth and profound revelations about the nature of family, trust, and personal strength. My career had flourished following the successful Singapore presentations. The clients I secured during that trip became long-term partnerships that elevated my standing in the company. 6 months after the confrontation with my family, I was promoted to Senior Director of International Marketing, with a substantial salary increase and greater creative control over campaigns. Professional success was satisfying, but the more meaningful transformations occurred in my personal life. I had cultivated a circle of friends who demonstrated what genuine support looked like. Chloe remained my closest confidant, the sister in all ways that mattered. Ryan kept in touch, our shared family history creating a bond that transcended the fractures elsewhere in our family tree. I had also formed new friendships through a support group for adults dealing with family estrangement. These individuals understood the complex grief and liberation that came with establishing boundaries with toxic family members. We celebrated holidays together, creating new traditions to replace those lost to necessary distance. My relationship with my parents and Leo remained severed. Occasionally, news would reach me through Ryan or other relatives. My parents had indeed followed Leo to Arizona, where he had found work in resort management. Ironically, serving clients similar to the one he had briefly been during his stolen vacation. They lived in adjacent apartment complexes, their financial circumstances still constrained by the consequences of their actions. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I felt twinges of sadness for what might have been if they had been capable of genuine love and respect. But these moments grew less frequent as I built a life filled with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. The house itself had undergone a complete transformation. Beyond the physical renovations, it had become a gathering place for my chosen family. Monthly dinner parties filled the dining room with laughter and conversation. The garden, now lush with plants selected for their resilience and beauty, hosted summer barbecues and autumn harvest celebrations. In the study that had once been invaded and violated, I established a small foundation named after my grandmother. The Eleanor Collins Trust for Young Achievers provided scholarships and mentoring for young people who, like me, were building futures without family support, using a portion of the trust funds that would have gone to my parents and Leo. We helped 10 students annually with college expenses and professional development. Through this foundation, I met Daniel, a financial advisor who volunteered his expertise to help scholarship recipients establish sound money management practices. Our professional relationship evolved into friendship, then something deeper. Unlike previous relationships, where I had hidden parts of my family history out of shame, I shared my full story with Daniel early on. "Your grandmother was a wise woman," he observed after hearing about the trust and its provisions. "She saw what was coming and made sure you would be protected." Daniel understood boundaries and respect in a way that made me feel safe. He had his own complicated family history and recognized the courage it took to prioritize emotional health over traditional family obligations. Our relationship developed slowly, deliberately built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine care. As the second anniversary of the confrontation approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey with greater clarity than ever before. The pain had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into wisdom. The betrayal had revealed truths that, while difficult to accept, had ultimately set me free from patterns of emotional manipulation and conditional love. Sitting in my garden on a warm summer evening, watching fireflies illuminate the twilight, I opened my grandmother's journal, a treasure I had discovered among her papers while working with Mr. Davis on trust matters. Her entry from 30 years earlier seemed written for this moment. Love should never require the diminishment of self. True family lifts you higher, sees your light, and helps it shine brighter. Those who would dim your light to make theirs seem more special are not acting from love, regardless of what they claim. Remember, Abby, you always have the right to step away from shadows and into sunshine. Those words captured the most profound lesson of my journey. Family was not defined by blood or legal ties, but by consistent actions that demonstrated respect, support, and genuine care. The people who had proven themselves to be my true family were those who celebrated my successes without jealousy, supported me through challenges without judgment, and loved me without conditions or expectations of unearned benefits. I had learned to identify the difference between obligation and genuine connection, between manipulation disguised as love and authentic care that expected nothing in return. This discernment had allowed me to create boundaries that protected my well-being while opening my heart to relationships that nurtured rather than depleted me. Perhaps most importantly, I had discovered that resilience was not about pretending harm never occurred, but about acknowledging wounds while refusing to be defined by them. My parents and Leo had attempted to reduce me to a resource they could exploit. By rejecting that definition and reclaiming my narrative, I had affirmed my inherent worth, independent of what I could provide to others. As I closed my grandmother's journal, I felt her presence as clearly as if she sat beside me on the garden bench. She had prepared me for this journey in ways I was only now fully understanding. Her legacy was not just financial security, but the wisdom to recognize true family and the courage to create it where it did not naturally exist. The house that had been the center of such betrayal had become a sanctuary again, not because the painful events had been erased, but because they had been integrated into a larger story of growth and transformation. Every room now held new memories that outweighed the old ones. Every space had been reclaimed through deliberate acts of creation and connection. Sometimes family isn't who we are born to, but who we choose to become through our own actions and the relationships we nurture. Sometimes the greatest gift in betrayal is the clarity it brings, revealing what was true all along beneath polite fictions and expected roles. Sometimes the most profound healing comes not from forgetting pain, but from using it as a foundation to build something beautiful and authentic. As the sun set on another day in my reclaimed life, I felt gratitude, not despite the difficult journey, but because of it. The house my family had tried to steal had become more truly mine than ever before. The life they had attempted to diminish had expanded beyond what I could have imagined. The strength they had underestimated had become my greatest asset, just as my grandmother had predicted all those years ago. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who cross lines? How did you handle the difficult balance between family obligation and self-respect? I would love to hear your stories and perspectives in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself is not selfish, but necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that sometimes the family we create through choice is more nurturing than the one we are given by chance. Wishing you all the strength to recognize your worth and the courage to protect it.